If you were to ask brand executives, people who help companies with branding, they will say we are seeing a dramatic shift in what is called a channel master. Today an Instacart basically delivers groceries from our favorite grocer. It could be Safeway, it could be Publix or whatever. Well, what's to stop Instacart from already setting up their own automated warehouses? DoorDash today delivers from our favorite restaurants. Well, what's to stop them from becoming the brand with a bunch of ghost kitchens? So that's another major change that's happening. If you were to ask the elderly, you mentioned the voice interface. To them, they would wish they had been introduced to telemedicine 10, 15 years ago. I talked to a healthcare executive who said, Vinnie, we've been experimenting with telemedicine since 2001. We could never get it over 2% of outpatient visits. Within 3 months of the pandemic, it was up to 50%, right? Mm-hmm. So, the changes that we've seen in every aspect of our life has been dramatic. Now, that is the interface to the brands we deal with. Well, behind the scenes, there's a lot more dramatic changes. So, every analyst will tell you e-commerce took off in 2020. Well, not just e-commerce, fulfillment took off. We've moved to a world of micro-fulfillment. Warehouses have gotten more automated. They've moved closer to the consumer. So dramatic changes in how our life was impacted, but just as much as how companies have had to pivot to make those changes. So yeah, the changes are dramatic and will survive. Many of them will survive.
People really appreciate all of the different kinds of services and great value they get from giving up their data in order to get something in return. So whether it's expediting some kind of transaction or increasing convenience or anything that augments their lives, that they are looking for, people crave that. They continue to embrace ways in which companies can serve their needs through their collection and then reflection of data. And given that that's all true, and I think the genie is totally out of the bottle, there's no way to put that kind of like, oh, we're going to decrease convenience considerably in order to do something that is not even commercially sort of motivated. I think we're kind of on that trajectory. That said, policy, both at the governmental level and within companies, is way, way behind. They have not kept pace with even now emerging consumer expectations around how data is handled and how their privacy may be protected and preserved. So I think companies are starting to realize that they can still have commercial success. Right, it's not commercially sort of discordant to be able to come up with more privacy-preserving approaches to collecting data and helping people understand the implications of data collection. But it's cultural, right? There's a slow, it's a very slow, gradual sort of wave of understanding. And then even as people understand that it's probably an issue or maybe an issue, or should I be worried about it as an issue, there's still a lot of education to be done around even basic things like what's the difference between my data security and being, very worried about data breaches and things like that versus my data privacy, which is all around how data gets used on my behalf. So I think we don't need to move all the way toward complete personal data sovereignty, which many people have suggested. So I think it comes with a lot of cost for the individual that they are explicitly not interested in, right? It's very hard to imagine shifting an entire population to just owning all their data all the time and figuring out how to dispatch it and give it permissions and all that kind of stuff. But emergent solutions are on the horizon, particularly using, new technologies. Around like smart contracts and being able to put those things in place so that data isn't always permanently held onto. It can be an expiring, sort of piece of data that gets collected.
One of the original thoughts that we had kicked around, I don't think it was published in the report, but was this idea of 2-dayers, this new class of people who kind of strictly stay at a 2 or 3 day a week kind of cadence. I plan to do that personally. It's just a chance to get out, to interact with some closer members of my team, not on Zoom for a day. But I don't live in town anymore. I took advantage of the chance to get away from the downtown area where I lived for 15 years in Austin, and I moved to a much nicer by the river place that's much bigger. And the drive is long, so I just want to go once a week to interact. And I think that's, for now, that would be my normal.
In the travel survey I did, I'm getting the feeling that people are, the 1 day, 1 meeting, flight, trip is dead. Very few people are going to do that, right? I heard from several executives, maybe 2 days is ideal. We'll take a trip, fly out in the morning, stay a night at a hotel, and pack it in with a bunch of meetings.
Yes.
So, that'll justify a travel. So I think the 2-day concept may apply even to travel, which is something I don't think the airlines and the hospitality industry are really ready for. Honestly, they are looking for a big bounce back from business travel. At the level of service they're providing, I don't think it's coming.
Whether it's, like Clay moving out from the urban centers, which means that it's costly to go in every single day, like literally human cost and personal cost, or a trip, to another city. That trip better be worth it, right? And a lot of people have expressed to me, to us, and our company, and every place else, that they're just going to take so many fewer trips. And every one of them is going to be a totally packed agenda in order to make it worthwhile.
What we are definitely, heading towards is more of a hybrid model. And that's where companies across industries will decide you need to be in the office once a week, twice a week, or thrice a week, depending upon your industry and business preferences, so on and, so forth.
I like code. I like the digital world. But I also feel like we have not treated this new medium very well in the past 20 or 30 years. It's been kind of throwing a lot of options at it to see what works, what sticks, and nobody's really figured out how to do things that help us. It's just noise in our lives at the end of the day. I think we've all experienced this in the past, especially the past year. I've been online constantly. Even when I leave my home to go somewhere to get out of this Zoom space that I'm in, I just get back on Zoom and back on email. It's all I'm doing. So I think my 2025 is going to be a better negotiation of how tech lives in my life and how it helps me only, it doesn't distract me.
Okay. Beth, what about you?
Yeah, I totally agree. I was going to answer something very similar to that, which is that I actually want technology to do more for me. I'm a little bit of a late adopter because I'm a skeptic. And so I'm looking at each technology and saying, boy, this better help me more than it makes me work. And I just don't find that my evaluation of technology frequently gives me that result, right? I am looking at all the features and functionality, and what's the cost to adopt and all those things. And people are constantly trying to make those evaluations for themselves. And so for me, my future is going to be one in which the technology truly enables me to, when I use it, and I myself can bring things to it, that together we do a better job than I would do by myself. If it doesn't do that, I'm not going to be interested, and I'm going to demand that from the technologies that I adopt. I think people really value credentials. I know the debate is raging on, but in our experience, people value credentials because society values the credential. So if you're looking at two candidates side by side, and one of them went to Harvard and one of them went to some state college, no comment on the quality of both of those pieces of education, but people's judgment is laden with this, sort of economic overlay that has taken the credential from high-powered institutions and put a value on it, right? It has value in the marketplace, and people kind of understand what that value is. And so in the absence of other means of evaluation, people look at the imprimatur of a good educational brand, and it's a brand, right? So rather than people sort of eschewing university brands, consumers are pushing institutions to change how they operate. And boy, oh boy, is it a struggle, right? Because institutions are like, no, we do a thing. This is what we do. And so they are, but people are requiring them to step up to the plate and offer more career-oriented programs that better prepare them for the modern workplace. And that means that they have a couple of opportunities. Favorably, universities are actually going to have an opportunity to dip into the consumer audience more than once. It used to be one and done, as you say. Now they'll have a chance to re-encounter the learner multiple times over their career, and that actually should be something that a university embraces, right? So they have more opportunities to drive new revenue, new ways of interacting with their alumni communities, and bringing people together again on campus, in online learning modes or hybrid experiences, and then the third thing I think that is happening is that there's a new type of credential emerging. And that credential is one that is more based in short form course or, learning experiences, ones that are more focused. They're more, based in skills and competencies, and also are ones that allow them to be in a marketplace and start to drive a new value. Right? One of the things that people have a hard time with is that they don't know how to value a credential. Neither the person who's taking those short courses nor their employer or prospective person that they're going to work with. So the value of those credentials still isn't known. And that's why the marketplace hasn't done so, hasn't embraced that piece of credential yet. But that's what's coming, right? That's what we can see in our future is the change in valuation of a credential, the university degree versus these micro-credentials, as they are often called.
So what you're suggesting is, maybe higher education institutions, right? They need to start preparing students not for a single career, but rather for multiple careers, right? How you're going to develop that mindset, at the end of the day. In fact, our earlier research, that we did, relearning how we learn, so that research revealed that, while 80% of businesses believe the importance of soft skills will be critical in the future, only 46% of higher education institutions, they agree that, human-centric soft skills are going to be very, very important in the future. So that's what creates a disconnect between talent produced and talent needed.
Before the pandemic, we had 6 million in the US, we had 6 million unfilled jobs. Much of those were trade jobs, blue-collar jobs, farming jobs, et cetera, okay? And, you could see we had emphasized white-collar skills a little too much. The student debt was increasing. Kids had spent a lot of money getting accounting degrees, legal degrees, whatever. And the market was selling them, you really should have become a plumber or a carpenter or what are the blue-collar jobs, right? And yet, young people still don't want to hear that message, right? So we have come out of the pandemic, huge labor shortages. Unfortunately, with the stimulus checks and so on, the market is sending signals, very, very loud signals, and the young people still aren't listening to them. So I think it'll take a rude awakening to parents, which is don't encourage your kids to rack up student debt and go get white-collar jobs. We're going to have to, as a society, slap the white-collar institutions a little bit and say, we've given you a little too much emphasis, right? So a lot of societal changes need to happen because we're not listening to what the market is telling us. And, we can talk about AI and so on, but that's all white-collar oriented still. I'm very worried about our trade, blue-collar, jobs, the need for people to be there and do what typically guarantee middle-class livings. I mean, I don't know of a hungry plumber. I don't know of a hungry carpenter or a hungry electrician, right? So I don't know when as a society we started looking down at some of those professions. And those are becoming much more automated, right? Those jobs are evolving with technology and so on. So I'd rather have our institutions say, how do we make our manufacturing jobs much more automated, right? That there's value added in that, rather than continue to say, I'll teach you accounting and let me show you how to apply the machine learning to that.
At the leading edge of education, which is where parents and their children are making choices about what to go into and how to make that, sort of educational experience at the most fruitful it can be, whether it's doing blue collar work, going to vocational education, doing something that looks more like a training program than a university degree program. And then I think that the other side of that's the big gap and difficulty is what to do with people who are aging and who are going to stay in the workplace for a really long time now, and that they want to continue to have purposeful work to do. And I think that we often decide that, it's all the same problem. But there's such different problems, right? The leading edge of education and the continuing edge of education are really different problems to solve. And they have people who have different kinds of needs. And so I want to emphasize that this is not one solution for everybody. This is a spectrum of solutions across the age spectrum, and how to help people at different ages get the kind of educational experience they need to build their career, whatever way they want to build it.
I do wonder if the education world can look at the service trend, of having a membership and explore that sort of model for education as well. If you think about just the idea of hiring, you value experience over a 4-year degree. Typically, the degree is a great marker, but the experience means a lot. Yeah. Also, this issue of older people in the workforce being kind of maybe not having the experience in the newer trending things, the newer technologies. As we see this kind of inception of a forever changing world and forever changing skills and expectations, look at the medical world where you have to do continuing education. What if you had a degree plan with a college? I went to the University of Texas, Hook'em, and you just subscribed and you continually educated. And that was it wasn't a degree. It was that I'm 10 years into my training, in this space that I'm always continuing my education within. So I think there's some innovation still to happen.